Welcome to Cypress, Playwright, Selenium, or WebdriverIO. Let the engineers speak. Today, we have an outstanding panel of engineers, hands-on practitioners at leading companies, and thought leaders in the testing and automation industry. It's my pleasure to introduce them to you. First up, Gleb Fomitov. Gleb is a software engineer with a PhD in computer science and is the Senior Director of Engineering at Mercari US. An avid blogger and speaker, he has circled the globe sharing his experience with other developers.
Hi, everyone.
Next, we have Tali Barak. Tali has more than 30 years of experience in software development, product management, and consulting. Today, she works for Ubik as an architect responsible for all front-end tooling, testing, and DevOps processes.
Hey, good to be here.
Next, Carter Kapakasha. Carter is the Senior Engineering Manager for Quality Automation at Hilton, where he focuses on quality automation and continuous integration practices for a variety of web-based applications.
Hey, everybody. Really excited to be here today.
Next up, Steve Hernandez. Steve is a Senior Software Engineer at Q2 Precision Lender. Initially a full-stack developer, he moved to test because of the exciting and progressive things happening there. Steve is also a contributor to the Boa Constrictor open source project. Next, Jose Morales. Jose is an experienced software engineer and the automation architect at Domino's. As a developer, he is eager to contribute to projects and has 4 public projects, including JMeter and JMailer.
Hello, everyone.
And finally, our moderator for today, Andrew Knight. Andrew Pandy Knight is the automation panda and a software quality champion who loves to help people build better quality software. As our developer advocate here at Applitools, Pandy helps folks make sure their apps are visually perfect. He also serves as the director of Test Automation University, which offers a multitude of free courses from the world's leading automation instructors. Let's give a virtual round of applause to welcome them all. Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences on your favorite social channels today using the hashtag #LetTheEngineersSpeak. And with that, Andy, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Pam, and hello, everyone. Thank you, speakers, for coming, and thank you, audience, for joining us today. As Pam said, my name is Andy Knight. I'm the Automation Panda, and I will be your moderator today. So to kick us off, I just want to give a little bit of backstory about why we're having this panel here today. So let's talk about how we got to where we are today with this Let the Engineers Speak panel. As many of you probably know, at Applitools over the past year, we've done a whole series called Let the Code Speak. And in that, what we did is we did a side-by-side comparison of different test automation frameworks, mostly focusing on web UI, and pitting them head-to-head to see which one or how they did things, and then which ones that you in the audience preferred based on the solutions that were shown. Excuse me. And so we did a Selenium versus Cypress. We did a Selenium versus Playwright. We did a Cypress versus Playwright. We even had a rematch between Cypress versus Playwright because there was so much more we couldn't cover in just like an hour and a half of a face-off. And so those were really, really good for comparing code head to head. But to cap off this entire series, one thing we wanted to do was to step it up another level and to get people who have had deep hands-on experience with all these tools in a panel together to discuss what they like about it, what their experience has been, not just what you write in 12 lines of code, but how this lasts for years and how this scales to teams of multiple people. And so that's why we invited some of the best in our industry to come talk about Selenium, Cypress, Playwright, and WebdriverIO together. So hope that kind of sets the stage for where we are today. So what I'd like to do to kind of kick this event off, I'm going to go around to our panel of speakers and ask them just to talk about what their project is with their particular framework of choices right now. And then we're going to popcorn some questions and just hopefully have a really good organic discussion about these different tools and frameworks. We're not here to tell you which one is necessarily the best or the worst. They're all good in different ways. What we want to do is help y'all in the audience form a better opinion and understanding of what the advantages and disadvantages of each approach were, what some of the roadblocks and speed bumps could be, and to really help y'all decide what's best for y'all's needs. So before we begin our panel, I'm going to direct all of y'all in the audience over to the polls on that right-hand sidebar. And we've got some polls that we'd like to ask of you today. Things like what is the size of your team? Who's responsible for quality on your team? So as you get a chance, please do fill that out. That just helps us understand who y'all are better. So all that to say, let's kick this off. So like I said, we're going to go around. I'd like to ask each one of our experts what framework you're using today. Tell us a little bit about the project that you're working on, some of the awesome things that you've done, as well as some of the speed bumps you've done. And I would like to start with Gleb.
Thank you, Andy. I'm Gleb Akhmedov, and I work at Mercari US. I'm in charge of web automation group, which means we test our web application. Mercari US is an online marketplace where you can list an item, buy items, ship it, and so on. I joined it about a year and a half, and my goal was to make it work so that it doesn't break. There were previous attempts to automate web application testing that were not very successful, and they hired me specifically because I brought Cypress experience. Before that, I worked at Cypress for 4 years, so I'm kind of partial, so you can kind of guess which framework I chose, right, to implement the end-to-end tests. We currently run about 700 end-to-end tests every day, multiple times per feature, you name it, with each pull request. On average, our flake, how many tests kind of pass or fail per test run, is probably 0.5%, maybe below that. So we actually invested a lot of time in making sure it's all green and working correctly. So that's my story.
Awesome. So next, I'd like to ask Tally how y'all are using Playwright.
Okay. So I work at Ubiq. Ubiq is a digital platform for frontline employees. That's a way to say people like sellers in shops. And they use our application in their daily job. That's been for the tasks they need to do, for their training, for their communication needs, and so on. And for this application to be useful, we have a very rich UI that we are using. And for that, we have decided to use web components. We're using Stencil.js and building web components. And this is important because when we try to automate the testing, this was one of the biggest barriers that we had to cross. We used to work with WebdriverIO, which was good to some extent, but the thing that really was problematic for us was the Shadow DOM support, the Shadow root. So I got into the habit for once every fortnight or monthly to go into the web and just Google end-to-end testing, Shadow DOM support. And voila, in one of these Googling, it actually worked out, and I stumbled upon Playwright. And it said, yes, we have Shadow DOM support. So I went like, okay, I have to try that. And I just looked at the documentation. It was like Shadow DOM was no biggie. It was just like baked in naturally. And I started testing it, and it worked like magic. That was almost 2.5 years ago. Playwright had a lot less than what it has today. It was still on version 1.2 or something. At the time, it was only the browser automation side. It didn't have the test runner. And because our tests were already written in Cucumber, and Cucumber is the BDD style kind of testing, like the one that you see at the bottom of the slide. So this is the way we actually describe our test, our functional test. So user select mission and then user start and so on. This is the test. We already had that from WebdriverIO, and basically we just changed the automation underneath to work with Playwright instead of Selenium that was with WebdriverIO. And this is still how we work. We are using Cucumber as the test runner for running those tests. We use Playwright as the browser automation. We have our tested app, and we're testing against a server and the database. We have about 200 scenarios. We run them on every PR. It takes about 20 or 25 minutes with sharding, but this is because they're really long tests. It also solved a lot of other problems that we had previously, like the fact that you can open multiple browsers. Previously, what we are doing, if we wanted to test multiple users, we would log in, log out, and log in with the other user. And here, all of a sudden, we could just spawn multiple windows and do that. And one additional thing that I want to mention, beside the functional test, this end-to-end test, we also run component tests. This is a different way using the Playwright test runner, in fact, is because we work with Angular, and Playwright component testing is not supported with Angular yet. We are using Storybook, and we test with Playwright on top of Storybook. So yeah, that's my story.
Nice. Thank you, Tally. So you were basically OG Playwright. If you're talking like 2+ years ago, back 1.2 release. Gleb, quick question to you before we continue on. How long have you been using Cypress?
6-7 years probably.
Oh my gosh. That's like, again, like OG, like from the beginning. Because I remember when Cypress first came out, like, what was it, 2016, 17? Has it been
16,
oh
I
my
believe.
Gosh,
Hey, my CTO was screaming at me, like, why do you trust with startup? What if they disappear? Why are you wasting time writing tests? And so, it was horrible.
Got it. Cool. Thank you both. So next I'd like to move on to Jose. Tell us about what you're doing on your project, man.
Thank you. From us in Domino's, well, Domino's is a big company, right? We have $4 billion in sales every single year. And only in the Super Bowl, we sell 2 million of pizzas just in the United States. So we have a big product, and our operations are very critical. So I decided to use WebdriverIO for a product. And this is the architecture that we created in Domino's. In Domino's, we have different environments. We have QA, we have pre-production, and we have production. And for selecting different kind of environments, we are selecting, we have the different kind of configuration. And in that configuration, Jenkins reads the configuration for that particular environment. We get the code from Stash, and then we are using virtual machines that it could be inside of the Domino's network, or it could be in Sauce Labs. Then we have a kind of reports. And one thing that I really love about the WebdriverIO is the fact that it's an open source, and it has a huge of libraries. So in Domino's, we are using WebdriverIO in 3 projects. That is Domino's website. We are using in the Domino's rearchitecture, and we are using it in the Domino's call center application. And the fact that we are using WebdriverIO with 2 different kind of reports, and we are using with 2 different kind of BDD frameworks. One is, of course, Cucumber, that is the most used in the industry, and another one is with Mocha. And in both, we have very successful results. We have close to 200 scenarios right now, and we are executing every single week. And we are generating reports for those specific scenarios. We have 90% of success pass rate in our scenarios. And we are using Applitools as an integration for discovering issues, visual issues, and visual AI validations. And basically, in all those scenarios, we are validating the results in all those browsers. We were normally using the Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Edge, and of course, we're using mobile as well in the flavors of Android and iOS. And the cool thing is that it really depends about what is the usage for customers, right? The most of the customers that we have are using Chrome, and we're seeing what is our market, what our customers are using, and we are validating our products in those particular customers. So I am really happy with WebdriverIO because I was able to use it in another problems that we were facing. For example, in Malaysia, we have some stores as well. And in the previous year, we had a problem with performance in Malaysia. So I was able to integrate a plugin that is Lighthouse, is from Google, in order to measure the performance for that particular market in Malaysia using WebdriverIO. So so far for us in Domino's, WebdriverIO is doing great, and I am really happy with the solution and the results and the framework that we selected. And that's everything from my end. Thank you so much.
Awesome, man. Thank you, Jose. That's a lot you got going on there. I mean, you got multiple platforms, multiple kinds of testing, and lots of integrations. That's really, really cool. Alrighty, next up, I want to ask Carter what he's doing over at Hilton.
Hey guys, nice to meet you all today, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with everybody. So I need to lead off with a little bit of a disclaimer here. Hilton does not necessarily endorse or use any of the products I may speak of today, and all the opinions that I'm going to talk about are my own. Yeah, so Hilton is a large corporation. We operate 7,000 properties in 122 countries. So when we talk about some of the concerns that I face as a quality automation engineer, we're talking about accessibility, localization, analytics, a variety of application architectures. We might have some that are server-side rendered. We might have some that are CMS-driven pages, and even multiple types of CMS. We also have things that are like that filter out bot traffic. We may use mock data, live data. We have availability engines, pricing engines. So things get pretty complex, and therefore our strategy has to follow this complexity in a way that makes things simple for us to interpret results and act upon them quickly. So to give you guys an idea of the scale here, we typically are much like, I think, Gleb in this regard, where every single one of our changes runs all of our tests. So we are constantly executing tests all of the time. I think this year, I was just running these reports the other day to figure out for interview review stuff. I think I pulled up that we had so far in this year run about 1.2 million tests on our applications. So that's quite a large quantity. So if anything that speaks to our architecture has some stability built into it, the fact that we were even able to execute that quantity of tests. But yeah, I'm a Cypress user. I've been a Cypress user now for about 3 years. Much like Gleb, I got faced with the challenge of, well, this only runs in Chrome. It's a young company, young team. And yeah, I think we stuck with it, and obviously today Cypress has grown with us, and we're really, really happy to still be using the tool. We were a WebDriver shop before, so I'm really interested to see what Jose is doing, and there probably is still some WebDriver code hanging around here at Hilton. But yeah, really excited to be here today. So thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Carter. Man, 1.2 million tests. That's impressive. Awesome. Alrighty, let's round this out. Steve, I already know all about the project you're working on, but please share for everyone else in the audience.
Does that make me OG boa constrictor then?
You're dang right.
When it started. Full disclosure, I had the pleasure of working with Andy in the past. I actually started as a full stack developer at Precision Lender. We're part of Q2, which is a big fintech company. If you had priced any skyscrapers or went to get a loan for a skyscraper, there's a very good chance that our software was used recently. I'm sure you're all doing that. But working on the front end, it's a JavaScript-based application using Knockout, but increasingly Vue. I worked over in that for about 2.5 years at the company, and I saw the cool stuff that Andy and our other Andy were doing. And I I was excited about it. I wanted to move over, see what it was all about. And I believe strongly in the power of test to not only improve the quality of the application, but also just the software development life cycle and the whole experience for everyone and the developers. So what you guys have in front of you is a typical CI pipeline that we use. So we use Git and we use TeamCity, and on a typical day we run about 20,000 tests. We have about 6,000 unique tests. And upon one commit to our main develop branch, we kick off about 1,500 tests, and it takes about 20 to 25 minutes, depending on, errors, test failures. But on that check-in to TeamCity, we use Stack with SpecFlow, and SpecFlow plus Runner kicks off our tests. As I said before, we're using boa constrictor underneath with the screenplay pattern. It acts as our actor, which is controlling the Selenium WebDriver. And then the Selenium WebDriver farms out the test work in parallel to the Selenium grid. And our little nodes, it's an AKS cluster, run through all of our tests and spit out a whole bunch of great documentation. One of my favorites being the SpecFlow plus Runner report, and other good logging to things like Azure Log Analytics. But so I am here today representing Selenium, but I do have to say it's pretty colored by boa constrictor. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you, everyone, for sharing a little bit about your projects to kind of set a baseline so we all kind of know what we're working on, and now we can popcorn some questions. Before I ask the first question, again, audience, I want to direct you to that polls tab. Please do check out the polls, answer those questions there so we can get a good feel and a pulse on who y'all are on the audience now that y'all know who we are on the panel. Alrighty, so who's ready for some questions, friends? Here's the first one. What are some of the biggest challenges that y'all in leading and working on your projects have faced in your testing work? What are some of the biggest challenges y'all have faced in your testing work? Who wants to start off?
Yeah, I think I'd love to be able to start with a quick one here.
Take it.
So I think one of the biggest challenges that I personally faced was that a lot of the times your technology is, of course, where the problems, I think initially when you're starting out with automation, the tech problems that you face are where all the focus gets put on. And people lose sight of that there's an entire component to process around this, meaning that, well, once you've written, your 100 tests, you've got your architecture stable, you figured out how to seed your database and connect to your APIs and do all the stuff that you need to do to make your tests run. Well, what do you do with those results? How does it actually impact your app? And I think a lot of people lose sight of that. Of course, with the advent of CI/CD pipelines, it becomes a little bit easier because now you can basically prevent merges or prevent releases based on the results of these tests. But I think that gets forgotten until we're way down the line. So, you've written all your tests and you come back to your dev teams and you say, hey, I'm going to start failing your pipelines now. And you're not going to be able to merge. You're not going to be able to deploy. And then you immediately have resentment against this process, right? So I think maybe the marketing of why you're doing what you're doing, how it's going to impact the process, and what is the positive result that comes out of this is equally as important as tackling those technical hurdles.
Yeah, I think I will go somehow along those lines. Besides some technical difficulties that I already shared about obviously the shadow DOM and untrivial actions like dragging. Again, some of the things that we encountered. The biggest challenge was creating a culture of testing in the organization, making sure that people test like that they should take care of the test. We didn't, because of some flakiness, we didn't want to prevent merges. I mean, a long time we built more and more into that, but at the beginning it was like, people, this is your helper, this is something to help you write better code, and it didn't came very easily, I would say.
Can I comment on this slide or Paul? I see selectors as one of the challenges, and it's a pretty big one apparently for a lot of people. I just want to say what we've done at Mercari US. So sometimes you're writing an end-to-end test, you come to a part of a page, and there's like some dynamic classes, no good selector specific for testing. So what we do in our test, we select however we can, right? By text, by position, you name it. But we do add a to-do comment, and I see my coworker Josh on this chat. So in our test repo, we have lots of to-do, like needs better test selector. And we have automated script that actually counts it and puts it in a README. So we know how many to-dos for selectors we have, right? Total. And one of our objectives as a team is to drive that number down. So we're adding selectors, and it's kind of good small task to do, but having good selectors is a key. So don't just kind of assume someone else will add it for you. Have it as one of your automated priorities.
That's really cool to actually have it kind of scan through and kind of pinpoints. It's almost like your self-lint. Wow, that's awesome. If I may ask another question off of this topic of the challenges specifically around selectors, what other challenges have y'all faced with selectors or innovative solutions to try to get on top of them? Like, does anybody use like smart selectors or visual selectors or anything at all?
Can I share my really staunch opinion on this?
Sure.
I personally don't allow merge requests that have XPath selectors in them. I disallow it. It is a forbidden practice at our organization. We actually start with, we have like a selector hierarchy that we try and follow. And I believe it's testing library. If you go and check out and I know it's a really generic name for everybody in this room, but it's genuinely is called testing library. And they have a selector pattern basically as a hierarchical representation. I think it says, accessibility selectors, and then at the very bottom, it even goes down to like classes and then IDs. But it starts with like accessibility selectors and then content and then, some other pieces that you should go through. And nowhere in that list is XPath. I know that a lot of folks feel like XPaths are necessary, but I think that you've got to find a way around them. I'm sorry if that hurts you there, Pandy. But yeah, in my opinion, I think XPaths are sometimes used as a crutch. And in today's world where you have components that are conditionally rendered, or potentially even like for situations that I'm working in, it depends on what part of the country you're in or what part of the world you're in. Your page may render completely differently than another. So therefore, I cannot rely on that DOM structures not be shifting at a moment's notice. Or there may be a CMS tied into this. So they can add a component to the page that's going to completely change the DOM structure. So we have to do better than that. And, tests more and more nowadays are being kept right alongside the application code. And I think that speaking back to what I was saying about kind of changing kind of the process around what you do, well, if I'm a test engineer, why can't I go and add, if I can't get to a DOM element any other way, why can't I go into that component and add a data test ID attribute? I should have that ability as a test engineer, just like a UI dev should have the ability to come into my test and modify that. So that's kind of, I think, a way you can kind of shift culture when you even think about like just something as simple as DOM selectors. But yeah, the long-winded answer to say, I personally think that if you want to have maintainable selectors, avoid XPaths.
I would like to share my opinion in two ways. One is the challenges that we have in Domino's, and another one is the selectors. The challenges is the maintenance of the test cases. And basically, what we are following is a good process. And with a good process, I mean, we have a team that is reviewing the executions, and we do analysis about the results. And we figure out if we need to fix the test cases, we need to change the test cases because the feature is now different, or what is the root cause of the problem, right? We are following good practices in terms of development, like code reviews, pull requests. We're doing pair programming. If some automation engineer is facing some kind of challenging problem, blocker, we have working sessions. They requested for those working sessions, and we work together, right, as a team to figure out what's the problem, what is the possible solutions that we can do, and it's very active. And coming about the selectors, we encourage to use the ID. And in Domino's, we have a custom ID. It's the UUID that all the web developers add that particular identifier for us to use. So there is a close communication between the developers and the automation engineers to work together as a team, how we can help to test better our product. That's another thing that we normally do, and respect as much as possible the page object design pattern. That is what we are doing in Domino's.
The slider was showing actually 3 items that were like shining there, which is flakiness, maintainability, and selectors. And I think they're all related to some extent, because if your selectors are too accurate, like XPath with all the DOM structure, then you have a maintainability problem, and you might have flakiness. And I have to say, if we are talking about the tools, this is probably the one thing that Playwright has solved in just a way that makes writing tests really easy. It's like I was hearing the other people here, and I went like, oh, we already forgot about these problems after working with 2.5 years. We used to work with XPath because that was the only thing that could pierce the shadow DOM. Now we are working with plain selector. We're keeping them to the minimum, and mostly the user-facing selectors. So things like text, usually maybe something like a header component and then a text, and we will know how to address the very exact selector, and that reduces the maintenance, because this is the last part that is likely to change. And because of the way Playwright is working with the auto waiting, so it will just wait. You don't need to put some timeout. It will know to wait until a certain timeout for the component to show up. You can write very small and very concise selectors. And the one other thing is that they have the strict mode, which means that if it finds 2 elements that correspond to the same selector, it will break the test. So, and one of the problems that we've seen previously is that it would go with the first element, so it might click a different button or something else, and the test will continue, and it will only fail like 3 steps or 5 steps ahead. And this is really hard to understand what is the problem. Playwright here would just tell you, look, of course you can change if you want it or not. It's an option, but if you do that, you get a lot less flakiness in your test, because the first time it will encounter the element, it will tell you, okay, I have 2 here, you're probably on the wrong path, go ahead and fix your test. So all these 3 things, the maintenance, the flakiness, the selector, is one of the, I think, the greatest advantages of Playwright in this term.
Awesome. So I know we've spent a lot of time talking about like selectors and DOM and modeling the page. What design patterns do y'all use within your test projects? I think it was Jose mentioned, like they use page objects and they stick to it very rigidly, or maybe rigidly is not the best word, but they stick with page objects. Are y'all using page objects? Are y'all using screenplay? I know Cypress has those, the action or the command methods. I forget, command action method. What are y'all using to help make your interactions using those selectors better?
Screenplay.
We don't try to make the test super dry, right? Eventually, if we see a duplication of code, we would write a custom command. For example, we have custom commands for like selecting by data test ID. So it's like really easy by data test ID or ARIA label. We use custom commands. We almost never write page objects. We prefer little reusable functions, right? We need to create a user. Here's a function, creates a user for you. There is one advantage though, because I like writing Cypress plugins, right? We can abstract something that is really specific and just move it to third-party public open source plugin that we'll reuse in our project. So we've been doing that a lot. I just looked, we have more than 20 Cypress plugins with our test repo, but 17 out of them is what I've written. So we take that abstractions and we make it and just have it by itself, so it become more powerful and reusable. But small functions and custom commands for us.
We are working with Cucumber, so this is basically our structure. Each step has the automation behind the scene, and then obviously you can reuse because the step is reusable in any of your tests. And we do try to build them sometimes a bit more, a bit more sophisticated kind of code that so you can reuse them in different places.
And most that using another design patterns, another thing that really helped to us is, and I saw a very interesting question about how do you integrate backend with JavaScript frontend? And that's a very interesting question because for us, we try to consume APIs as well. So, for example, in Domino's, we have an application that is the OSINT, that is an interface for configuration for our stores. So every manager in our stores can configure certain parameters for the store, right? Like the store phone number. So they can go to a specific website and then change the store phone number, for example. So if you think about the testing perspective, you can go to the UI, a change on a particular store number, but then hit an endpoint to refresh the backend for that particular store configuration. And then you go to another backend to hit the store profile, and then get the store profile with a request and read the JSON back, right? So you don't need really to interact with the UI all the time, but you can also integrate with the backend as much as possible. So that's a very clean strategy because it helps you to test faster and test better and reduce the flakiness. And the another thing is that I recommend is to use the plugins, right? So explore the plugins that you can get in the industry. For example, in the backend, and if you are interested in measure the performance, you can use the Lighthouse with a WebdriverIO, right? So you can, with the standards in the industry, to measure what is the performance for your application, for your web application, right? So we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and that's my recommendation.
Awesome. So I know, Steve, right off the bat, you had mentioned screenplay pattern. I wanted to come back to that. What have you found has been good about using screenplay over something like raw calls or page objects or something else?
Personally, I haven't used a lot of raw calls. I've had the luxury of using Boa Constrictor. It kind of wraps the Selenium stuff in a warm hug, and it handles a lot of the timing issues that you might run into. Boa Constrictor has a lot of built-in. I hear you guys talk about plugins. We have a lot of built-in interactions, or they're called. So they can be questions that you'll ask of an API endpoint. They can be questions that you'll ask of the page in the form of, I'm going to scrape this column here that I use over and over to compare to something in the future. So we'll have our Gherkin steps, and essentially backing each of those step definitions are these different reusable components or questions or interactions. That works very well with the level of parallelism we're doing. If you're firing off 50 threads at a time or 80 or more, we need stuff to be fast, not step on each other's toes. So we write the interactions in a way where they're very atomic and they're not going to affect something else that's happening on another thread. As far as page objects, I haven't used those a whole lot.
Good. Alrighty, so I mean, our conversation is now kind of going in so many good directions. This is awesome. We keep talking about integrations and how our frameworks and our tools can connect with other things. So I guess my next question I would like to ask as a big popcorn question would be, what are some of your favorite integrations with your test projects? I'm talking about things like CI hooks, special reports that y'all have, maybe things for visual testing, accessibility testing. And not only is this a question for the panel speakers, but also for the audience. We have another Slido word cloud, so head over to the Slido tab. We'd love to hear what your favorite what your favorite integrations are for your test projects. But I'd like to now direct this question back to our panel and ask them. Pick one, tell me why you love it so much, tell me how y'all use it, and what value y'all get out of it.
Okay, I'll hop in here. So I think for me with Cypress, since it's just under the hood, it's just JavaScript, right? So most anywhere is going to be able to hook into that immediately. So when we talk about integrations, let's just use GitHub, for example, here. If you wanted a GitHub Actions pipeline, you can just go ahead and start doing that immediately. And Cypress out of the box will provide you a Docker image to go ahead and use right inside of your GitHub Actions pipeline. So for me, I guess I'm not going to focus on any one specific tool for integration here. I think the way that Cypress kind of makes itself agnostic to all external tools is what makes it really, really nice. It doesn't say, hey, you've got to use us with this particular, like an Azure pipeline or any kind of other DevOps tool. It says, hey, under the hood, all we are is a JavaScript framework. If you want to execute our JavaScript inside of some kind of Docker image, create your own Docker image. Gleb knows all about this. He publishes a new Docker image like every day, it seems. Then we have, the ability to take all that, take the results, and basically what comes out of Cypress is just JSON. And okay, we'll shoot that over to a open source dashboard. So there's a report portal out there if you wanted to, take those results and then put them into a portal. So I see on here like Allure reports. Well, okay, so you take it and you just put it into any kind of integration there. So I think for me personally, I actually wrote a whole blog post about this where I was able to take Vercel, GitHub Actions, and Cypress and set up a CI/CD pipeline completely for free with automated deployments, preview environments, automated testing, the whole 9 yards. And so it made it to where, for my personal little website, all I got to do is submit a pull request. It kicks off all my tests. As soon as it's done, it merges it, and then it's immediately deployed with Vercel. So that was a really cool thing. So if I have to name a tool, I'm going to say Vercel and GitHub Actions.
Can I second that? GitHub Actions are amazing. Honestly, I went through the whole, self-running Jenkins to TeamCity, BuildKite, Circle CI. GitHub Actions are the best. It's amazing how much you can do with just JavaScript on your CI, right? And I was the one writing all the integrations for Cypress team. I want to bring one more integration. I've written it. It's integration between Cypress and Launch Darkly feature flags environment, because during the test, sometimes you want to test an experiment behind a feature flag. And for us now, it's an open source plugin. It's like this. Here's my user. Here are the experiment values I want to enable. Let's see this functionality. And it's working.
I'll throw the GitHub Actions as well. It's just, I don't have that much experience as Gleb with different tools. I used to work with Travis and a bit with Circle CI, but GitHub Action is just answering everything we need. And Playwright, obviously, because it just requires a node for the JavaScript version. You just install it or with the Docker and you're good to go and do whatever you want with the outputs and so on. So yeah, GitHub Actions. And I'm actually interested in the other one that you mentioned about the feature flag. That's worth looking into. And of course, Cucumber. I also have a repository that is a starter repo for working with Cucumber and Playwright. I'll post it on the channel if anyone is interested to try it out. If you want to stick with the Gherkin and the BDD style test. Otherwise, go with the Playwright test runner.
Tally, I want to plus one to both things you said there. First of all, everyone knows I love BDD, I love Cucumber, I love Gherkin. So yes, but also I want to go back to what everyone is harping about GitHub Actions. Y'all in the audience, if you haven't tried GitHub Actions or used it yet, definitely check it out. It is like very straightforward, low to no cost CI baked into your repo. I mean, like anytime I've done like open source projects or example projects, just putting in GitHub Actions to automatically run your tests from a trigger, oh, it's beautiful. It can be a little intimidating at first because you've got that YAML structure you've got to learn, but I have found it very easy to pick up. I feel like personally, and speakers back me up on this, I never sat down and like read a manual on how to write a GitHub action. I just kind of looked at GitHub Actions and like copied them and tweaked them, and it worked. You know, and I've done it.
And then you went to the marketplace and looked for some.
Yes. You know, and so it's like you can find things that are out there already, and I've done it not just with Cypress and Playwright, but literally like every single test framework out there that I've touched. You know, if it's like a Selenium thing, if it's a Playwright thing, a Cypress thing, yeah, any kind of test unit integration, end to end. You name it, like it's awesome. But anyway, I just wanted to plus one to both of those, and now I'll yield to the rest of the speakers. Favored integrations and why?
Can I give a plug for LivingDoc? We use a lot of the SpecFlow stuff in our stack, as you saw, like the runner. There's a great SpecFlow plus runner report that gets generated and can show how each of the threads are performing in your test suite, so you can look at performance. But one of the things, just like really simply, is the Azure Log Analytics ingestion API. So right in your test pipeline, you can just throw up a PowerShell script or some console application and send that data that you would have in your CI tool over into something like Log Analytics. I suppose there's an equivalent for Amazon. But then you can correlate, you know, your telemetry from your application along with test data and start to see where performance issues are introduced. But I guess coming back to my plug for LivingDoc is I feel in a lot of cases, our automated tests are actually the only documentation for some parts of the application as far as how they're supposed to work, because you've captured the requirements in a test. So they're kind of like living documentation, and LivingDoc literally is that, and it's something that you can share with the business and the developers to see what you have for coverage. And it's human readable. I think that's really important.
Well, now with GPT-3, everything is human readable.
So I wanted to ask about visual testing, and specifically with Applitools. I saw that and heard that some of y'all had used visual testing with Applitools in your projects. In line with talking about integrations that you love, how do y'all use Applitools if you use it, and what value do you find you get out of it? Go ahead.
Yes, I want to bring up kind of why Applitools is a different like breed of product when it comes to visual testing, though. So like you really have two flavors of visual testing, and one is a bitmap comparison, where you take a screenshot of an image and it takes it and basically breaks it down into, you know, computer readable code, and it compares, you know, a known standard against the new version. And if there's a certain percentage of divergence between the old version and the new version, it flags it. You can kind of already tell, well, if all I know about is just basically ones and zeros and comparing the results here, it's not really all that intelligent, because I could have a piece of the page that's, let's say it's a headliner, and the headline updates every 5 minutes. Well, I don't have time to just continually update this baseline screenshot. Well, what a tool like Applitools does is it actually takes your screenshots and puts them through computer vision. And with computer vision, you can now provide a lot more instruction to, well, what do you want to compare? What's important to you? Do you want to ignore certain parts of the page? When I, you know, compare, you know, X to Y, you know, do I really consider, let's say, like a carousel where the images are being delivered by a CMS and they're being changed on a daily basis? Do I really care that yesterday it was a picture of, let's say, somebody's front porch and today it's a picture of a tree? So there's a lot more intelligence that's built into a tool like Applitools than there is with standard like bitmap comparison. I think it takes the right kind of customer for Applitools, and when they do have that right kind of customer, it's a pretty huge game changer, considering that it allows you to make a lot more informed decisions about the health of the visual appearance of your application versus like I said, a bitmap comparison.
For those, yep, let's go ahead.
I'm going to wrap up real quick, Jose. Basically, if you want to compare the two, one is analog, the other is digital. The analog is the bitmap comparison. The digital way is Applitools. And if we're being honest with ourselves, the Applitools way is probably the best and right way to do this. I just know that there are a lot of teams that are making smaller scale applications that can get away with assuming higher risk in using a tool like a bitmap comparison tool.
I would like to add that we have been using Applitools for 6 months or so, and it was a great addition to our framework. It was reducing a lot of code because we were coding a lot of assertions. So for example, if you go to the Domino's website, right, you have the store locator, and then the store locator basically based on your zip code, it automatically populates the city, region, and the store closest to you, right? So there is a lot of functionality there. And I remember that we were validating every single text field, every single button, every single drop-down menu for the content, and in English and in Spanish and the different languages, right? So for us, it was very helpful to use Applitools because with WebdriverIO, we can simulate the location from the customer and then move the store locator for that particular zip code and tell to Applitools, hey, take a screenshot for this one. And that's it. And we, in one single shot, we are validating all the colors, button, text fields, content. And we were very careful to see what is worth it for this scenario, right? So in all the framework that we are what we are doing is, okay, let's test this particular functionality for this scenario. Let's using WebdriverIO to move the customer until this particular checkpoint, and then take a screenshot for that particular state in our application. And in one single shot, we can validate this in all the devices, right? In Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Pixel, iPhones. So with that particular action, and because we're reducing a lot of assertions, we are writing less code. It's easy to maintain, it's easy to extend, and our test cases are more accurate, are smaller. And I think for us, Applitools was a great addition, and I fell in love with Applitools. And currently, we are trying to incorporate in the mobile validations, meaning iOS and Android as well.
Awesome. Interesting. So I'm going to ask another popcorn question here. And this one, again, comes with an audience poll. So if you're in the audience, hop over to the polls and take a look here. Have you ever considered switching your test tool or framework? And if so, why? If so, why not?
Yeah, we considered it and did it. I think you have to acknowledge that at a certain point, maybe what you're doing isn't working, or the tool doesn't fit your application or your architecture. And it's a really hard decision to make, right? Because typically by the time you get to that point, you've invested tens, hundreds, if not thousands of hours into a framework or an architecture. And making that switch is not an easy task. So
what did you switch from and to?
Yeah. So WebDriver to Cypress. And it was you can already kind of see that architecturally they're very, very different. but yeah, it was not an easy task, not an easy undertaking. But I think we had to admit to ourselves that WebDriver did not fit our needs. It didn't operate the way we wanted it to operate. It was set up in, at least for us, it was set up in a way that did not match our development cycles, did not match our UI devs patterns and processes. So when we talk about, kind of making a team of test engineers have additional help, well, one way to do that is to align what you're doing align with your test automation practices with your UI dev practices. And so if we can have a JavaScript test framework that runs in a web app, that acts like a web app, that feels like a web app, well, we've now just added an entire team of UI developers that are, we've kind of made them testers, but we haven't told them that yet. That's kind of how that works. You adopt these people by just aligning with their tooling, and all of a sudden they realize, like, hey, I can do this too.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask another question. Since you're saying you used Selenium WebDriver before, in what language did you automate your tests? Was that in JavaScript, just like first tests, or was that like in Java or Python or something else?
Yep. So it's JavaScript, but when we look at like kind of how that the architecture of the app, right? So the architecture of WebDriver is very different than Cypress, because Cypress, you write a JavaScript function just like you write any other function, and most of the time it's going to operate just like you expect it to. And I think that's where, instead of them having to learn a WebDriver framework and what the execution order of things was and how the configurations work, Cypress is just pretty apparent in how it functions. When you look at like, well, how is the Cypress test executed? It uses Mocha under the hood as the test runner. So that's just functions that are just kind of inside of like describe and context and it blocks. So I think anybody who doesn't know anything about testing, but is a JavaScript developer, can hop right into Cypress, look at it and say, yeah, I think I know what's going on here. And probably within the first 5 to 10 minutes, write an assertion or write a selector.
Awesome. That's really cool. And so was that something that you and your team or org did recently? Was this like a couple of years ago that you made this transition?
I think I'd be lying to you if I told you the transition ever ends, right? I think I think it just it starts and you get to a point where you've scaled and you've gotten to where you've written a ton of tests on it, and then that's great. But of course, there's like, it's kind of the bell curve of testing. Like it starts really, really slow because you're moving off the old framework, then you start to scale really quickly, you peak, and then at that point you have these kind of outliers on the other side of the bell that are just kind of, they're running legacy applications, or they just don't want to move off of it, or for whatever reason they can't move off of it. Let's say they're running like Node 10 still. It's like, well, okay, maybe we don't want to invest the time there to move them off of it. So it's a long journey to do a task like this. So it's never done. By the time we're finished, we'll probably, there's going to be a new testing tool, or Cypress will have a new version, or something else will be new in there. Pipelines will be, it's through some AI network at this point. Who knows? But I'm sure we'll have to start the next task.
So how about others in our group of panelist speakers here? Have y'all ever transitioned from one framework or tool to another? Or in your current project, did you establish it and you were just super happy with what you chose, and tell us the reasons why?
Yes. So we also switched from WebdriverIO, as I said at the beginning, and we switched to Playwright. Obviously, it was not that painful, to be honest. Maybe because we kept the Cucumber side, so we had the scenario. We had less scenarios than what we have today, so it was less to move. I think it went over a period of few months. Unlike you, Carter, we actually moved completely away from WebdriverIO. There is no WebdriverIO. Everything is with Playwright. But again, probably a smaller organization, so we were able to do that. And are we happy? Thankful every single day for this switch.
I can comment. At Mercari, we did switch from WebDriver in Python and Mabel, right? So both were because the maintenance of tests and debugging a failed test was a very hard problem. And everyone agreed that there is a problem. The transition was, again, faster than we would we expected, just because the previous test did not work very well, right? So at some point we were like, well, we have 50 failing daily tests, right? It's not like we can keep them. It's not a sunken cost. It's a cost of not working. So we have to recreate the tests, but it was not a bad. So for us, the cost of debugging and maintaining the previous tool just became overwhelming, and we decided, let's just do something else.
In my experience, we were using the Selenium with JavaScript as a previous framework, and then we moved to WebdriverIO with JavaScript and Applitools. And because in Domino's we have different kind of products, we have another product that is called next generation of the stores, and we're using a reactive application there. It's also a website application. And we're evaluating another tools for automation, such as UiPath. And one thing that I like about UiPath is a low coding solution. That means you don't need to really be a very proficient developer in order to create the scenarios or automate with UiPath, because it's only drag and drops and create the scenarios, and it's very easy to automate. And in the top of that, with UiPath is a very enterprise solution. We have a different kind of components, like an orchestrator. We have a test manager. We have integration with Jenkins. We have robots that execute our test cases. So it's an enterprise solution that we implemented for that particular project. And we have the same results as WebdriverIO with the Applitools. We are happy with the two solutions, the two frameworks. And we're considering to remove WebdriverIO and Applitools and use UiPath for the main website for Domino's. So I think in the future, the low coding solution for automation is a way to go in the future. So definitely UiPath is a good candidate for us for our automation in the website.
How about you, Steve? I know you're right now on a Selenium-based test project. Have you and your team thought about either moving to something else, or do you feel pretty good about the whole Seleniumness?
I think clearly there appears to be major speed ups that you get from the JavaScript-based solutions. And I know you've evangelized a little bit about Playwright, and then I'm hearing good things from others. I mean, we have a mature solution. We have 98% pass rates. You know, some of the limitation is more what our application can handle when we blast it with tests. I don't know if your developers, after each local build, are tests running locally using some of these JavaScript solutions. But I think one of the things that is appealing is the speed. And with Boa Constrictor 3, the roadmap is to, well, it has been modularized, so you can bring your own REST API client, or potentially swap in Selenium and swap in something like a module for Playwright. So we would get that speed up, but keep the same API that we're using. So we're toying with it, but if we can pull that off in Boa Constrictor, that would take care of that for us.
Yeah, man, definitely. So, I mean, it sounds like a big trend from a lot of folks has been, you know, step away from things like Selenium WebDriver to more modern framework. You know, because Selenium WebDriver is pretty much like just a low-level browser automator, which is still great. It's still fine. It's still awesome. But I mean, one of the things I personally love about Playwright, as well as things like Cypress, is that it gives you that nice feature richness around it to not only help you run your tests, but also help develop your tests. So awesome. Alrighty, so we've had a fantastic conversation amongst each other as panel speakers. What I'd like to do for the remainder of our time is I'd like to actually transition to audience Q&A, because we have more questions from the audience that we could possibly answer in about the 10 to 20 minutes we've got left. So audience, now's your chance. If you have any burning questions you want to ask us, please pop them in the Q&A tab, not in the regular chat. I'm going to be pulling from Q&A tab. And also upvote questions that you see in there, because I'm going to be answering from the top to the bottom in terms of how they've been upvoted. So our first question comes from Jonathan Nathan. Can Playwright or Cypress handle multiple browser tabs? What do engineers in these tools do for Azure authentication or target new links?
It's a very specific and interesting question, right? Multiple tabs and Azure authentication. You must have both. I think Playwright is a better tool because it supports multiple browser tabs controlled right out of the box. So I would go with that.
Okay.
Yeah, can I share a hack for this real quick?
Sure.
So I'm going to share the way that you don't have to deal with multiple browser tabs in Cypress. And that's just you change the DOM from a target blank to a target self, and then it just opens in the same window. So if you have to use Cypress, you need to get around multiple browser tabs, you can do DOM manipulation with Cypress.
Man, it sounds kind of hacky, though.
No, I mean, it's absolutely right. Yeah, it's hacky.
So I got a question then. Is that like a feature request anyone has lifted up for Cypress? Or is that just because of the way the Cypress app itself is designed that's just a non-starter?
It's an open issue. A Cypress team says it's not a priority, right? Because you think about two tabs, right? Two tabs represent communication between one user and another, or the backend. So you always want to kind of stop that and control it, so you don't have to actually have two windows. You want to control one window and communicate with API calls on the back. At least that's the Cypress team opinion. So we might not see it anytime soon.
Yeah. I know in Playwright, like Gleb, like you said, it is really easy and nice because you can have a browser you have a browser instance, then in that instance you have multiple browser contexts, and then from each browser context you can have multiple pages. So it's I love it. Love it.
Yeah. And the better thing is that you can have one of them like in a mobile size or emulating a mobile device and the other one in web. So if you want to run a test of like chatting between two different users, each one is an incognito, is a complete browser context. They don't share their local storage or anything. So basically you can run any test that you want on the thing. And because of the browser, it also works really fast because it's not really launching a whole browser. It's just launching a browser context, which is much, much faster than launching a whole browser.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to our next question here. This is from Sundakar. Many of the customers I worked with are preferring open source, and do you think Applitools will have its place in this open source market? Can I answer this one because I work for Applitools? For this one, I think absolutely yes. I mean, all of Applitools SDKs, the eyes SDKs are open source. What Applitools provides is not only just the mechanism for visual testing, but also the platform. We work with all the open source tools, frameworks, you name it. So absolutely, I would say there's a place here. Let me move on to the next question.
Andy, before
ahead.
you move on, can I add? So my computer science PhD is in computer vision image processing, right? So it's all about comparing images, teaching them, and so on. I would not run my own visual testing service, right? My goal is to make sure I'm testing web application, keeping images, comparing them, showing the diffs, updating it. It's such a hassle. It's not worth it of my time. Just pay for a service like Applitools and move on with your life.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Let me pull the next question here. This is from Daniel. I heard a lot that Playwright is still a new framework with a small community, even when it was released in January of 2020, but never heard that about WebdriverIO. As far as I know, Playwright is older. I don't think that is true. I'd have to double check.
No, I don't think.
Is Playwright still considered new?
It's newer than the others, but it's growing really fast. I mean, because I'm the OG, I've seen, I mean, I remember the time when I would mention Playwright and no one had any idea what I'm talking about. It was very, very new. This is not the case anymore. I mean, there's still of course, people don't really hear about it, but the community has grown a lot. I think over 40,000 stars on GitHub. The Slack channel has almost 5,000 a participant or something. So the community is growing. Playwright is growing really, really nicely, and you're welcome to join.
Okay, here's another question from Ryan Barnes. Do y'all integrate automated tests with a test case management tool? If so, which ones?
Yes, TestRail.
TestRail, okay.
Because we're not the only testing tool, right? Across organization, there are other teams, other tools, and manual testing. So we need a central testing portal.
No, we are not perfect, and we should. Any good ideas are welcome.
So we don't have a formalized test manager tool, but if anybody has ever used any kind of Atlassian tooling, there's Jira out there has the idea of a test set ticket, and inside of the test set or individual tests, you can define user flows inside of there. So I guess you can consider that a test management tool. It's a little bit less featured than something like TestRail. Actually, it's a lot less featured than something like TestRail. Mm-hmm. But that's how we stay organized. We basically tie our tests to a ticket, and that's how we can manage. Well, what is this ticket test? What is it supposed to be testing? Where is our source of truth?
I guess I could launch a somewhat controversial question here, but I'll do it rhetorically, not to answer. But if you have a test automation solution, do you really need to have it export results to a test case management tool, or can you just use the reports it gives you? Believe that for offline. Let's move on to our next question here. Oh, okay. This might get a little spicy, so I'm going to ask it anyway. This is directed at Gleb. Why is Playwright.tips owned by you and redirecting to Cypress?
Okay. You know how you have 10, 20 domain names that you have, and you maybe in the future you'll do something. So I have Cypress.tips, which is a great domain name, to be honest. I'm so happy that I found it. And I'm putting all my blog posts, courses and so on there. And then I discovered that Playwright.tips is available. And I was like, I gotta have it. And right now it just redirects to Cypress.tips. But, it's important to not kind of have narrow tunnel vision. Learn as many testing tools as possible, right? Know the strengths of each one. So maybe I'll do some tips and blog posts and videos about Playwright in the future, and the domain is already there. If Microsoft wants to talk to me about purchasing the domain, that also is fair game.
So the next one on the list here is from Sindhuja. We are trying to convert our test scripts from Protractor. Okay, that's a blast from the past. We are doing proof of concept in WebdriverIO, and we have issues with running in Firefox in WebdriverIO. Is there any noise in WebDriver with cross-browser? Jose, got any insights for us here?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I really love about WebdriverIO is the easy configuration. So when you create a project in WebdriverIO, you have a JSON file where you put all the configuration that is about capability, services, what browser you want to use. And you can easily add your own configuration. It could be, for example, if you want to run it in Firefox or in Edge, or you want to run it in Sauce Labs, you have several options. So it's really easy to integrate the configuration for Firefox. You only need to specify the browser capability in the capability section, along with the version and a special feature like a size view. If you want to know how to do that, it's very easy. You can go to my homepage. I'm going to put it in the chat. And there is examples where you can build something from the scratch. And you can see easily where to add that particular configuration. And I'm going to share with you some repositories in GitHub where you can see some examples how to do it.
Thank you so much, Jose. Oh, here we go. Which framework would be the best platform to test both Android and iOS apps? And I know most of us is focused on web UI. So here's a curveball mobile.
I can say that at Mercari US, we picked Detox after using Appium for a long time. But for new React Native projects, we went with Detox.
Yeah, Detox is the only one that I've ever used it for as well. And it was really, really good. I found no reason to switch. I think, Gleb, can you correct me if I'm wrong on this? I think Detox was originally made by Wix. Is it Wix,
That's correct.
the company?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Wix used to make Detox, and I think it's still maintained by them. But it was like an in-house tool they open sourced, and now it's really good.
Awesome. Cool. I hadn't heard of it, so I'll have to look it up. Alrighty. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for question and answer today. I want to say thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you to all of our speakers here on the panel. Y'all have done give a hand of applause for all of them. It's just been a great time. Yeah, I see all the emojis flying up.
Thank you, Andy. I too want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you for the panelists for sharing so much of your knowledge with us, for answering questions. Audience, have no fear. We have captured all of the questions, and be looking for blog posts from us in the coming weeks about bringing up some of these answers to some of your questions. If you are eager to advance your automation knowledge and skills, I urge you to check out Test Automation University. TAU is one of the web's most loved and most respected providers of test automation learning and certification, and it is 100% free. You can find a variety of courses and learning paths for the frameworks we discussed today, and many of the most commonly used languages, tools, and technologies as well. You can check it out at testautomation.applitools.com. Also, the learning continues here in January with webinars on leveraging AI and UI UX testing and building a future-proof automation pipeline. Be sure to check the upcoming events page on applitools.com for these and other webinars and events. And finally, Applitools offers a number of solutions to help your team work smarter. If you'd like to see how any of them work, our testing specialists are ready to help. There are tools and icons and resources within the platform for you to schedule a time with a testing specialist. Thank you again, all of our panelists, for a great session today.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you for your
Thanks.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure. Had a lot of fun today.